Listening on Audible helps your imagination soar. Whether you listen to stories, motivation, any genre you love, you can be inspired to imagine new worlds, new possibilities, new ways of thinking. Maybe you'll find inspiration in the incredible true story of Black female mathematicians at NASA in Hidden Figures, or the fantasy world of Throne of Glass. There's more to imagine when you listen. As an Audible member, you get to choose one title a month to keep from their entire catalog. New members can try Audible free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/imagine or text imagine to 500-500. That's audible.com/imagine or text imagine to 500-500.
Hello, welcome. Let's chat. It's hard. You want to talk? I know, that's disappointing. Sit back. Let's work this out. How's it going? What are we doing here? Where are you going? Hey there. Wow. It's not always easy. It's amazing if you think about it. Let's think about this. Strange. I have some thoughts about that. Life is hard. Trauma bonded.
Hey, trauma bonded lovelies. Elly here. We're happy to bring you a This Is Actually Happening Storyteller update on Katrina Brees from episode 278, What If You Couldn't Keep Her Safe? And this is from May 2023. It wasn't that long ago, you guys, but it feels really long ago. We talk about her life since recording her episode and the behind-the-scenes elements of going through the show process, your before, your during, and your after. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Katrina. Katrina, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on your show.
So what's your life update since your story was recorded? And I say that it's different than when your story aired because I know there can be a lot of time between when your story was actually recorded and when it actually goes to airing. So whatever you want to tell us about, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. My life isn't much different at all. I'm getting ready for carnival season with my art, which is my busiest time of the year. I'm talking with legislators every week about Donna's Law. I think the thing that has changed the most in my life is that I've developed this self-talk of saying this is actually happening anytime I'm doing something I don't want to do, which every day when I'm flossing my teeth, I look at the floss and I say, this is actually happening. But yeah, other than that, my life is really mostly the same.
Can you give us sort of an update on where Donna's Law is at with regard to state-by-state legislation?
Sure. So we have about a dozen states that have active bills currently. I was speaking with Kansas legislators last week, and we have bills coming in Michigan, Ohio, Massachusetts, Louisiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, probably Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont. It's really gotten quite the momentum going.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I really applaud that work that you're doing. I mean, listening to your episode, it's so startling to know that it is so easy to get a gun when you're in that sort of flux mentally. Let's change a little bit. Tell me what, and I already know this because I did your pre-interview, but tell me what made you decide to submit your story to This Is Actually Happening.
Sure. I've been on a lot of shows discussing Donna's Law in the last 5 years. I had just done a segment on CBS Sunday Morning, and when I watched my episode on there, I felt like my story kept being rewritten into making sure that it had a happy ending. And this story of Katrina Brees had this beautiful life that was somewhat perfect, and then this tragedy struck, and then she was able to heal herself with legislation, happily ever after.
Yeah.
And that framing of the story was really starting to mess with my reality and my sense of self, and just not feeling that it was right anymore. I felt that the way that the media wanted my story out there in order to capture as big an audience as possible was to create this perfect story with the happy ending that my mother didn't die in vain. but it's not really true. And I wanted to work with This Is Actually Happening because I knew they would not turn it into a happy story, and they would let a sad story remain a sad story, which was really important to me.
Yeah, we're good at that.
Yeah. I'm also a heavy consumer of the show, and I listen every Tuesday morning, and I cry, and then I can't wait for the next episode. This is my favorite show, not just my favorite podcast, but my absolute favorite show. And I had listened for years and was so grateful to all these other storytellers that had shared these deeply personal stories with me, essentially for free, that I was able to listen to them. And I wanted to give back into that. I kind of imagine like on Soul Train when all the dancers make 2 lines and then it's your turn to dance between the people.
Yes, I love that.
I really felt like it
image.
was like my turn to do it and to share back. And so many of the listeners are also the storytellers. So to be able to have that give and take within that community is really beautiful.
Yeah.
I have some more reasons too. I'll just say them.
Keep going.
Sure. Another reason I wanted to do the podcast was because I really see it as the library of trauma. The podcast is like 300 ways that your life can suddenly be flipped and leave you suffering. Of all these ways that society logs information into annals of museums and libraries and official holdings of information, the collection of traumas is so important to humanity. And I wanted to contribute in that way, academically and societally as well.
I think that's really, really beautiful. I want to talk a little bit about going back to the CBS This Morning, and you talk about, every story you'd kind of dealt with wanted to have this happy ending. Why do you think it's important for your story to show the nuance of all the ups and downs and the hardships that go along with it?
I guess for other people that this is happening to, I don't want them to think that they're failing. Like, I don't want them to see me on TV and say like, oh, well, her mom did this and she's fine, and look how successful she is, and look how empowered she is and healthy, and I didn't want people to like falsely compare themselves to that. And also myself, comparing myself to a character that's on TV is really strange. And then kind of being forced to create that in reality among my peers. I think it's important that we have honesty about it. I understand why they do it, and like, I'm lucky that they're willing to talk about suicide at all on these shows, because 5 years ago when I started this, they wouldn't even have mentioned it. So it has to be packaged very specifically, and, no one should be depressed at the end of the story and things like that. And so I wanted to find a different space where it could be more real and more helpful to society.
Yeah. What was your experience of going through the process? Because it is a hefty one. And I know anyone that's gone through it will say, from sending the email to us, which, and embarrassingly, sometimes it has taken up to a year or more to get back to people, but waiting for the email to get responded to, going through the pre-interview, then having to wait to schedule the recording, and just the overall communication with This Is Actually Happening. Can you just talk about your experience of going through that really tough process?
Yeah, sure. It was a bit intimidating. I think that the things that I was most scared of was making my mom look bad. It's hard to talk about someone that, does things like this and still have the audience have compassion for her. So I was really nervous about how to deliver that in a way that wouldn't make people resent my mom or wouldn't make people feel sorry for me that was my mom. So that was really important to me, and it's hard to hold that line when you're opening the floodgates, and it's a real interrogation once you get into it, and so it's hard to think about like, okay, where are my boundaries and what are things that I shouldn't say and what are things I can say and how will people feel if I say these and how will my family feel if I say these things. There was a lot of concern in my mind about that.
Yeah.
I was concerned about how it could be edited and how the NRA and people who support the NRA might react to it. That's a bit nerve-wracking. I obviously want people to feel supportive of Donna's Law. To make sure that this story like resonates with people. The process is long, but not for nothing because there's so much work going into it. The submission process and then, like you said, the pre-recording and the pre-interview. And I was so concerned about my sound. My neighbors were having construction, so that was on my mind like every day. Like are they going to be like drilling the whole time?
Dude, I'm the same. I live in an apartment complex and I feel like they're constantly doing things outside my window, or it's like hold for train.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you feel like the episode did everything you wanted to? I mean, just as a listener, I can say, as a listener, I felt such a kinship with you and your mother. And, I felt like she was honored and her story was told in a way where I didn't want to judge her. I wanted to hug her.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I absolutely love the episode. I feel like it's perfect. As an artist, I am forced to make beauty in this world. And to me, there's so much beauty in sadness and discomfort. And to be able to take such a horrific story and make it just like so beautiful, like it's like, I don't know. I just think it's so perfect. It's exquisite. I'm so proud of it. I'm so grateful to the editors and to like every person involved that they worked with me to put this together. As a listener, you just kind of assume that every one of these storytellers is just such a good storyteller, and you don't really realize like how complicated it is to tell that type of story and how much work goes into it.
Exactly. It really is something to be made. And just a shout out to Sarah Marinelli, who edited your episode. And it's easy for people to go on the internet and just rip things apart,
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's obvious when people haven't ever made anything in their life because they can so easily just rip things apart in 2 sentences when a lot of like love and effort has been put into something.
Yeah, I want to like kind of fangirl about Whit Missildine
Go
a bit
on,
because
go
I feel
on.
like everyone kind of has a crush on him. Although now I have a
Sure.
crush on the editors. But he's really like a master of what he's doing, and to be able to like share that space with him and to tell the story with him and the way that he's so trained in even before being a podcaster in like finding out people's trauma histories and piecing it together, and the questions that he asks are then making you think of answers that you've maybe never even thought of before. And while I was talking to him, it was like my brain was just so electric because he's putting together my past, and my parents' past and my grandparents, and creating this kind of like map of the trauma in my family. And to be able to see him working that is truly amazing. And then he doesn't like comfort you much when you're talking to him, I think probably on purpose, but he has this like sympathy about him that's kind of quiet, and he'll be like, mm-hmm. And then he doesn't get sappy or slow down, but he does have this way to keep you propped up emotionally because of his soft strength and persistence being modeled in front of you. So I really commend him for what he's doing on that. And then I want to say too that like anyone considering doing this show should consider doing it with their name so that you can actually hear Whit Missildine say your name and be like, Katrina Brees. I mean, it's just, awesome. It's so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking too, like, after you and I did the pre-interview, one of the things was that I was telling my mom's story and that you wanted me to tell my own story, even though it's pretty much the same story. But that was so significant to me that you said that, because I had been sort of like this like carrier of my mom's story, and like thinking about it as like her legacy. And then since you said that, it's really helped me like take ownership that this is my story and this is my legacy, and to be stronger in that, and to, you know, be proud that this is my story.
That's awesome. That makes me feel good.
Oh, good.
I'm sure I got that from Whit. I mean, he really is so wonderful. I could also fangirl about him forever. You know, when we first were becoming friends, you know, I thought I was a person that talked, or that was inquisitive about myself and other people, but then I met Whit, and he takes it to another level. In fact, when we were first getting to know each other, I would commonly be like, "Do we have to talk about this?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, we need to talk about it." But it was always like, it always felt like a safe space. He is so nurturing, but he really wants to get to the truth of things. So you're right, there's not a lot of like sentimentality about him, but he is like really kind and supportive. And I try to tell our storytellers after I have a pre-interview with them to lean on him as much as they can, because he really wants to do his job professionally and tell your story in a way that honors the way that you want it told, but he also really wants to be there for you, because he understands that it can be re-traumatizing to retell these events, especially to someone, or of a handful of people that are strangers, you know.
Yeah.
In listening to the edit, did you feel like the edit got anything wrong or askew, or anything that you would want to maybe reframe or clear up?
No, I really thought it was perfect.
I love it.
I thought that, I mean, it was so seamless to me. Like, it felt like when I listened to it, it felt like how I wish I could speak that well, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have nothing to add to that.
Okay, great. Did you, I know that you did not be anonymous. You said your name, of course. And so did you receive a lot of contact from listeners, and what was that experience like?
Oh, yeah, it was a total outpouring of love from strangers. It felt very sweet and made me feel like I have a new community in this podcast community. I'm really impressed that people were brave enough to listen to my story, because I don't get that opportunity in life to talk about this for that long and have people listen. It's really dark for a lot of people, and they can't handle it. And it's, I think that I would say, and then also like people in real life that I know, like people that I collaborate with, or customers or things like that, I would run into them and there would just be this like new air about them. And I'm like, oh yeah, they heard the podcast.
What is the air? What is that
like
feeling?
like sometimes people would just tear up, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't even know what to say. They would just be like, I heard your podcast. I love you. I had some friends that just thought it was so amazing and tried to get people to listen to it, and they'd like forward it to people, and then no one would listen to it, because it's just such a certain type of listener that listens to this show. And you also have to be a person that can be entertained by trauma. It's not just about absorbing it, you know. I mean, podcasts are entertainment, so, you know, not everyone is that type of person. Within my family, my stepdad loved it. My stepdad, Pat, he's like one of the heroes in the story. And
Yes,
he
truly.
listened to it. He totally loved it. He's like, you have to send this to your dad. And I was thinking, like, my dad is too sensitive to listen to this. And then my stepdad sent it to him. And then my dad made it about 6 minutes in. And that was all he could handle, because it just was way too heartbreaking for him to hear it.
Well, you speak so sweetly about how they met and their youth, and I'm sure it like immediately just brought up so much for him.
Yeah, it really did. And one of the things in that brief amount of the podcast that he did, that he was able to consume, in it, I'm talking about like, my parents and how they met and why they decided to have kids. And I made a comment like, that's just what people thought they should do back then. And my dad was really affected by that comment. And every time I see him now, he brings it up. He's like, I want you to know that we didn't just do it because that's what we do. We did it because we wanted you, and we wanted you for so long. And it was like what completed us. And it's really sweet. And it's become this like way that we talk in our family now about that's just what people did back then. Like, there are like, there's so many ways in a family that you can look at the past and be really judgmental of, your ancestors and choices they made. But to be able to say, that's just what people did back then, and move forward in our judgments, and let's not just stay in the criticism of the judgment, and let's just like move on as a family and know that like we wouldn't make those same choices today. So that's been a really powerful tool to be able to just use the words like, that's just what people did back then. And move along.
Well, I mean, and what an kind of amazing opportunity that it gave your dad to even hear that bit and like acknowledge that in his mind and make sure that that was corrected. Like a lot of people wouldn't get that gift, I guess, between parent and child.
Yeah.
And maybe we talk a lot about generational differences, right? And it's like sort of like a boomer generation, just they're really good at compartmentalizing and maybe not expressing all of their feelings around having kids. And so it can get chalked up easily too. That's just what they did back then.
Yeah.
And then tell me, I wanted to ask you, did you get any kind of negative feedback from listeners or just trolls?
No, I didn't get any trolls. I mean, that I noticed. Maybe y'all deleted them. But I would say that the messages that I tend to negatively react to are typically from bipolar moms trying to explain my mom to me or see me as holding the answer for their daughter's anger at them. I think that my story often comes off as this like idyllic story of like a bipolar mom and a daughter. And it's really complicated to have a bipolar parent. And when I get these messages from bipolar moms that I feel like they're very like desperate for answers, but it often feels like they're projecting a lot on me and my mom. And I was very angry at my mom her whole life, and it didn't end until the day she shot herself. And that is not an answer to curing your daughter's anger. It might not even work. It might make it worse. So so that can be really uncomfortable and sad for me, I guess. And sometimes I feel like moms can kind of become like obsessed with me in that and want me to kind of like hear what they would want to say to their daughters and justify their own behaviors while in episodic, psychosis and things like that. And that can be a lot. And I tend to get like really angry, even though I don't mean to be, but I can, I will say that there was one person, and I'm pretty sure that my response was, fuck off, that's why your daughter hates you.
Okay, yes.
But I try not to do that. But it, it can get intense. And there were also a lot of very intense stories that I appreciate, and I wouldn't say they're negative, but people sharing their own stories, like in quite a bit of length, like they listened to my whole story, now here's their whole story. And so a lot of stories from daughters who lost their moms to suicide or things like that were revealed to me, and I do appreciate that those people felt so connected to me.
Yeah, it feels like a great deal of pressure.
Yeah.
Is it? I mean, there's community and then pressure. Do you feel like you have to respond to everybody?
I would say that really, and I didn't get any of the following type of comments that I'm going to talk about now. But I do once in a while get messages from someone who is in the throes of suicidality, and they're a mom and they want to kind of figure out a way that they can kill themselves and that their daughter isn't going to be all fucked up. And they see me as like, you know, someone that knows how to pull that off. And I don't know how to pull that off. You know, like it's very much just, you know, destiny or chance, you know, or like my dad is a lawyer. Sometimes I say I have big lawyer's daughter energy. So it's very like me to go into legislation, even though I had never done it before. It was, you know, something I knew about. So that can be really hard. And 5 years ago, I would stay on the phone all night with one of these moms and just like hope they didn't kill themselves and be like really affected by it. And now I just give them the suicide hotline and I say like, hey, I'm not a professional. I don't know how to deal with this. Like, this isn't a space that I can help you with, you know?
God damn.
Yeah. It's intense. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like sometimes I think like on one level it's like super rude, but on the from their perspective, it's like they're so desperate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't blame them, you know? I'm sorry that they're in that situation.
Wow. Yeah, that's intense. Are there any comments or questions that have come about? You kind of addressed this. I guess thinking people making assumptions about you or something that you wanted to clarify. And I only bring this up because I happened to catch people talking about our storyteller from episode 302 about our storyteller whose brother had molested her and then killed himself. And then her other brother killed himself as well. And there was just a lot of assumptions being made on Reddit about who abused the brother. Was it the father? And she actually came on and said, hey, I'm the storyteller, shut up. That's not what happened, kind of thing. So I'm just wondering if there's any assumptions that were sort of being made that you feel like you want to address or correct.
No, I felt like people really got it. And
okay.
I went on Reddit last night, and I don't even think I got talked about on Reddit.
It's random over there.
Yeah. But the things that people wrote, like in the Facebook group, were so beautiful, and I just appreciated so much. And, I mean, people took a lot of time to write beautiful things to me. I think I'm lucky. I mean, other people's stories are... I guess like the audience could, you know, feel aligned with them or not. I think that people felt a lot of care about me and, I don't know, just like love for me.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention one neat connection that happened was another storyteller recently bought art from me. Anne Cronlidge, who was electrocuted.
Our human jumper cable.
Yeah, I hope she doesn't mind revealing like what she purchased for Christmas.
I'm sure she doesn't. She doesn't seem like she would.
But
although you might be spoiling someone's gift right now.
Yeah, I figured that this, you know, there's time. But
this will air after Christmas. I think we're safe.
But in her episode, it turned out that her childhood home was like blocks from where I live. And then I messaged her. I was like, oh, wow, I live right there. And then she went and she looked at my art, and I had paintings of like very calm, peaceful paintings of New Orleans, zero trauma. She like purchased all these pieces for Christmas gifts for her family. And she also purchased my grief relief card deck, which gives prompts of activities one can do to promote a healthful lifestyle while grieving. It's so sweet and generous that she would choose to support my art and that it resonated with her in such positive ways. It's just such another level of the community because, like, we can share sadness, and there's a lot of sadness that I shared with a lot of people in the comments and in my inbox and stuff like that. But then to just be able to like share a little bit of like Christmas present joy with someone is so sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes me really happy. So I'm assuming you're glad you went on. This is actually happening. How did that experience fit or not fit into your healing journey? And would you tell your story again in this way.
Yeah, I'm totally glad I went on the show. I really feel like it's such a strong community that is built around that podcast, and I didn't even, as a listener, I hadn't entered into the social media aspects of the podcast before my episode aired, so I didn't realize like how much chatter there was, and the way that people are talking to each other, and also how carefully it's monitored by your team to make sure that people aren't being abused or doxxed or things like that. So I guess like part of me before doing the episode felt like all this work I'm doing about like being open with my story and sharing myself and doing Donna's Law was part of my healing. And then after I did the interview, I was just like so exhausted for days. Like I just like went to bed, and it made me realize like how much it really does take out of you, and how it does like open the wound up again, and how much I want to be a healed person, and how I want to project that to all the people who love me, and to my therapist. I want her to feel like a success, and that I want people to feel like I want people to feel like I'm sad, and then they said something, and then it worked, and and they did a good job helping me as a friend, or something like that. So I've really faked a lot of healing over the years, and doing the podcast like really made me realize that. And it also made me realize that I have a lot of numbness about just insensitivities about anything, whether it's like whatever's on the news or my own story, and that numbness isn't healed. Numbness is numbness.
That's true.
And so that became like more obvious to me. I also kind of invented this story for myself, that doing legislative work and saving lives and getting Donna's Law passed was part of how I was going to heal myself, and that other people who are victims of gun violence could also heal themselves by advocating for, gun legislation, or, other issues that they've been traumatized by. And since doing the episode, I've realized that legislation is not like a healing modality. I think it can be like really traumatic, and just keep opening it up. And in being a listener and doing the show and thinking about healing, it's made me think a lot differently about like what healing even means. And maybe there's this level of healing that's like, okay, I'm not bleeding out. Like I have scar tissue and my, but
triage.
Yeah, that like I've survived, but that having this happen with my mom, it's like losing a limb, and like every step in my life that leg is missing, and even like there's this like pain that exists in everything, like my mom was very musical, and I haven't really been able to enjoy music since she died, things like that. So I think that I see the healing differently now. Like it's okay if I'm sad about this forever. It's not my job to be happy. And one of the things that I experience, like, let's say like within my family, about like if my dad sees me as like not being very happy, for example, like he will look at things like, maybe I need a career shift, or maybe I need a housing shift. And, and it's like, no, Daddy, like this is just how it's going to be,
Practicals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, I guess I look at it differently now, that like, even if I cry every day, that's okay. Like that's what this is. And, that I should, instead of like judging my healing based on how much I cry every day, to think about the things that this has strengthened in me. Like, for example, courage and my education about legislation now, and learning to like stand and deliver in front of Congress and things like that, I'm really proud of. So there's a lot of things that I'm really proud of. And I feel like I'm sure for a lot of the storytellers, like you have this experience that you're not capable of surviving, and then you have to become a person that can survive that. So you become this like whole different person, and that person, has good and bad. Like that new person might have new addictions or relationship problems or life changes. But then you're also like so much more resilient to, new traumas in life.
Right. There's no finality in healing. It just keeps going. Oh, it sounds exhausting.
It really is. Like, I am so fatigued in my life. Like, I'm like, is this, like, I come up with, like, all these, like, medical things. I'm like, is it this? Is it that? And I'm like, no, it's just trauma. Like, trauma is exhausting.
Yeah. It's just life. But I guess if you're looking at it positively, it's like a seasoned cast iron pan. It's seen some shit,
Yeah.
It's just a little bit more rich in flavor. So we've not done your episode yet on Trauma Bonded, but I do hope that we get to someday. And I know that we're sort of out of sequence at this point, but I don't see why we can't go back, at least to honor you in this. Do you welcome that experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. I do feel bonded, like, with y'all. I mean, it's such a, I don't know. I mean, there's nothing like exposing yourself this way, just openly, and allowing people to hear your story and to have your story welcomed that way. I mean, it's like even the people who love me the most in my real life, have not given me what this podcast has given me. This is a very specific type of people that, are very bonded. And so I do welcome being on your podcast. I recently recorded with the Bunny Hugs podcast. I know that's
shout out to Todd.
Yeah, that's kind of like part of the same community. I'm connected with a lot of the listeners and other storytellers now on, especially on Instagram. So it's cool to just like see them liking my art, and that they, it's like I do parade work. So a lot of people begin their relationship with me with this really like joyous, over the top carnival experience, and then had to kind of go down with me on this like sad story. So it's nice to have these like new people in my life that were willing to start at the bottom with me, and then get to see these, these kind of like surprises of the beauty that I create.
That's great. So tell us, how can people support Donna's Law? What's the best way, the most grassroots way people can do that if they want to go do something right at this moment?
Sure. You can go to donnaslaw.com and you can put your contact info in, which includes your state. And when we get to your state, we will ask you to send a letter to your representatives. Because I'm a Louisiana resident, I don't have a lot of power in other states, so I often need an advocate in that state to help me make introductions to the representatives, which is a huge thing someone can do for me, but it really doesn't take that much effort. Like, they can just like essentially let me use their email address and have them like send a letter that I wrote and help me make that connection. So that's just like so valuable. And so donnaslaw.com, people can make donations to help me travel to go do these things. That's really appreciated too.
Is that on the same website?
Yep, they can donate through the website.
And where can people find your art?
They can find my art on KatrinaBrees.com. You can check out my My paper mache work is under the name Colossus there. And then I also have a dance troupe called the Bearded Oysters, and you can check them out online. I also do a lot with like DIY funeral art, and that's on fantasticcasket.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love just the sound of that.
Yeah, you'll enjoy it. So yeah, or people can just Google me. I'm doing like all kinds of work. Lately, I've been using the skill set that I have learned through Donna's Law and applying it to female topless equality. So, men are allowed to have their tops off and women aren't. So that's work that I've been doing lately. Also, if people are interested in that, sometimes like I've become so obsessed with doing Donna's Law and kind of living in that world since the trauma. And often people are like, what do you do for fun? And so now I can say, like, I do this other legislation for fun.
This has been an episode of Trauma Bonded. Thank you to Katrina Brees for talking with me today. If you want to affect some change right now, right at this moment, do not hesitate. Go to donnaslaw.com. That's DONNASLAW.com. It's a website advocating for a voluntary do not sell registry for firearms. You can also see and buy Katrina's art at katrinabrees.com. Spread some post-Christmas cheer or some pre-New Year's love. And look for Katrina's episode on Bunny Hugs and Mental Health podcast. Thank you to Forrest Chiras for editing this special episode. And next week, look for another comments review episode. Oof, that Halloween episode was pure controversy, y'all. We are trauma bonded to the story, to the storyteller, to the listeners, and to each other. Thanks for spending time with me and Katrina today. Miss you and love you, T.
Good job. Hey, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Trauma Bond.